Hello and welcome everyone. Really excited to be joining y'all tonight. Before we get started, and as people, I say trickling in, but we are already at 447 members jamming in here. Want to make sure everyone knows that we have closed captioning available if you check your Zoom toolbar for captions, just to get that started. And I will take this opportunity to remind our speakers and myself not to rush through our points because it does make closed captioning less accurate. And yes, that is my cat Artemis. My name is Christian Hernandez. I'm the chair of the National Political Committee. Please take some time if you haven't already to introduce yourself in the chat. Our chat is open for now, as we will be dropping a link for Q&A, though you're also welcome to use the Q&A function in the Zoom itself, or again, in that handy Q&A form that's being dropped now and will be dropped sporadically throughout the call. The chat will be turned off during the presentation and discussion portion because it is distracting, but we do welcome any feedback. Again, the Q&A doc that we are going to be putting together based on your questions will get shared early next week so that we have them all in one convenient spot, and that will be regularly updated so that we're, have all questions answered and bringing everyone in. This call is an hour and a half. This first section will involve some touching on some of the convention related changes, and then we'll get into our discussion and debate. And then the last portion of the call will be a convention orientation where we will have our Q&A. So it has a lot of really important information. So I do want to ask that you try to stay on, but we are recording this call so you can watch it later, if that's your jam. The convention information section will start around 8:15 Central if anybody does need to leave and come back. But just want to touch on a few key takeaways from this orientation. We have a pre-convention discussion guide and end of year report coming out. So we really encourage folks to use them, read them, discuss with them. We will also during convention be ensuring that we hear consensus resolutions from labor, electoral, Green New Deal, multiracial organizing, and growth and development. And at the end of last year, the NPC also approved hearing resolutions around internationalism, housing, and YDSA. Our signature thresholds will be higher. However, we are also centralizing where potential resolutions will be shared. So it evens the playing field as far as making sure people are able to review what's being put out there and being able to sign on to things. We are going to also focus on breakout discussions and plenaries that draw on our past and existing work and less on, a billion resolutions that we can't implement in 2 years' time. You'll also hear about apportionment, which this convention will be one delegate for every 75 members in your chapter. And if your math is mathing, that means you'll likely have the same number of delegates as the prior convention if your membership numbers are similar to 2019. If they're not, the GDC, our Growth and Development Committee, will be spearheading a February membership drive all throughout the month of February. Unfortunately, my suggestion of text your ex members didn't fly, but it is an opportunity to engage people with expired memberships and non-members ahead of the apportionment deadline of March 1st. Now, the 2023 convention is so important for countless reasons, but ultimately this gathering at this particular moment in time will be consequential for the future of DSA and by extension, the future of the left. Which is why we are hosting this call tonight. And hopefully this will be the first of several calls where we continue to identify the questions that we should grapple with, the obstacles that we face, the lessons that we can learn, and the opportunities for struggle. Political debate is a necessary tool and can help us depersonalize conflict and practice the skills that help democratic organization. To that end, we have NPC members here from different tendencies and political traditions. And despite what you have or haven't heard, we're all here because we love DSA. We don't always like DSA or each other for that matter, but we're here because of a fervent commitment to a new world and the belief that DSA is our best vehicle for that on the left. So I'm going to close by asking for everyone here to approach tonight with curiosity, compassion, and courage. We're all comrades here, and while that can get messy, democracy is messy. And while DSA is not perfect by any means, it is why we are all gathered here tonight. And I think we owe it to ourselves and each other and all our loved ones who can't believe we have yet another DSA call to be on, to ground ourselves in that. Because scoring points may feel good, but I promise you winning power for our class feels so much better. And it's the only thing that's going to give us the world that we deserve, but we have to believe it. And most importantly, we have to commit to the work that it will take to get us there. So now I'm going to pass it over to Sophia to talk us through some of the convention changes that I mentioned earlier.
Thank you so much, Christian. Hi, Sophia Cutler, she, her, calling from Jersey City. Michael, are you able to share the slides? Okay, thank you. So I'm going to get into a little more of the details about what Christian outlined before we start our discussion and debate. First of all, in the next few months, the pre-convention time, we really want to encourage a lot more discussion and debate. We're hosting this mass call. We're planning on, hopefully hosting more, and we hope that you and your chapters can host your own panels and discussions. So we'll also, in that period before convention, be sharing some recommendations from us, the NPC as a body. We are planning to create a pre-convention discussion guide for you all to carry on this discussion locally. Look out for an end of year report where we're going to assess the work that's been done over the course of this term. And we're leading this mass call, which you're all on right now. Michael, can you go to the next slide? Okay, now for the resolutions. So as Christian mentioned, NPC is going to be requesting consensus proposals from our key national bodies. So the National Electoral Committee, the National Labor Commission, the Growth and Development Committee, the Multiracial Organizing Committee, Green New Deal, the International Committee, YDSA, and Housing. And so these proposals are going to be sort of consensus resolutions, but they'll be open to lots of amendments, and debate is going to flow through those amendments. And convention is also, of course, going to allow for more resolutions than that, but there's going to be a high threshold for this. I'm forgetting the exact number of signatures. If anyone knows offhand, I think it's 300, but someone should, okay, 300, yes. So the higher threshold, I think, is really going to allow us to get into more substantive debate and really make sure we're understanding what we're passing here. Can you go to the next slide, Michael? Okay, convention structure. So the basic agenda. It's going to start on Friday, August. Someone should drop the exact date, early August. And we're going to have a keynote speaker, and August 4th to 6th. We're going to have a keynote speaker and the NPC chair frame the moment. Then we're going to have a Robert's Rules training, so everyone can have that framework for debate. Then we're going to have lots of plenaries, just like the one we're hosting right now. Breakout groups, guided discussion, just so we can have lots of political discussion, sharing that isn't necessarily tied to voting at that very moment. Can you go to the next slide, Michael? Okay, and then on Saturday is when we start deliberating and voting on specific resolutions. And we're also going to have that day panels highlighting different campaign work and workshops for members to share strategies and discuss. And then we're going to have an NPC candidate panel where candidates can present, and I'm assuming also answer questions. And then on Sunday, we'll have deliberation and voting on resolutions again. and the announcements of the next NPC and discussion on next steps. And can you go to the next slide, Michael? Okay, and then the remaining part of the presentation we will do at the end of this call. Thank you. And I'll pass it off to Jose to kick off the debate.
Good evening, comrades, and welcome to the National Political Committee's debate about the future of DSA. My name is Jose Alejandro La Luz. I'm a member of the National Political Committee from New York City's chapter. I'm a member of the Socialist Majority Caucus, and I am here in East Harlem, in New York City. I'll be moderating the debate section of the program tonight, and the participants are expected to introduce themselves in the order that they will speak, beginning in the first session, the first question. And we are asking them to tell us their chapter, their caucus, their location, and their pronouns. Immediately after the question and debate section, we will have a general question and answers section as well. So let me begin by stating the first question for the purposes of our debate tonight. In a time that is not propitious for the left, how does DSA orient itself for the long-term struggle for socialism? What strategies, practices, or structural changes prepare us for intentional growth in the long term? And we're going to start with Comrade Justin Charles. Justin, please introduce yourself.
All right, good evening, everybody. Good evening, comrades. My name is Justin Charles. I use he, him pronouns. I am coming to you from Brooklyn, New York City, specifically Bed-Stuy. Yeah, so, and I'm a member of the NBC. So this specific question, I think, is an important one. We're not in the same period we were in 2016 or even in 2019, 2020. It's definitely a different time. It's a hard time for the left. I would call it a kind of period of retrenchment. That doesn't mean, and it can be dispiriting. That doesn't mean we stop what we're doing. I mean, I think part of the task of us as socialists, the task of us as a socialist organization is, you know, when the fire is roaring, we are right in the fire, and when the fire is no longer roaring, we have to keep it going, even if it's just blowing on embers to make sure it doesn't go out. I think part of that blowing on embers, though, is for us to, I think, you know, we've been doing this in this kind of reinvigorated DSA since 2015, 2016, right? We've developed a lot of skills in that time. We've done a lot of different kinds of organizing. We've been engaged in fights with the boss, with the landlord, with the state, with, you know, the Democrats, with Republicans. We've been engaged in all kinds of fights, and we've learned a lot along the way. The thing that I'm wondering about is, like, how do we as DSA members take all of these skills that we've developed in these years and bring them to bear in our lives every day? How do we politicize our everyday lives? And this, people might say, well, what does that have to do with DSA? I mean, it does. How do we show up as DSA members in the struggles that our class is engaged in, where it's engaged all over the place. And I think one of the things that I'm excited about for this convention is an opportunity for us to kind of reflect and strategize on where we need to be present and in what ways we need to be present in the places, in the struggles that members of our class are engaged in. How can we show up strategically with focus, but also assessing the landscape holistically? How can we develop a strategy that allows us to do that effectively?
Thank you so much, Comrade. Next is Comrade Christian Hernandez.
Thanks, Jose. Yes, my name is Christian. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I'm from North Texas. I'm a member of the Socialist Majority Caucus and am currently serving my second and last term on the NPC, as well as the Steering Committee and Convention Committee. Now, I think building a resilient organization is our primary task. I would argue that there's never a truly favorable time for the left. DSA is one part of the broader left, but as the largest socialist organization with an orientation of mass politics that has concrete implications for sustaining our growth. We want DSA to be an organization that brings socialism to everyday people, makes our solutions mainstream, and helps move people deeper into long-term struggle, while also staying connected to a broader, vibrant movement and not isolating ourselves or our members. But while we do have an uphill battle to fight, there are sporadic opportunities for progress. And in between, we must sustain the grueling work of organizing and maintaining the organization that we've built. And this is tough because we are going to reflect our class, the good and the bad, as we navigate this task. The fights we wage externally do not prevent these dynamics from existing internally. We are not immune from the rage, grief, loss, anger, and despair exacerbated by the constant crisis of capitalism. People are leaving organizations, not just DSA, because at times the world we want can feel increasingly out of reach. So our personal capacity affects our organizational capacity, and burnout is hitting hard, especially with members who've joined DSA since 2016 and before. This means we cannot continue to underestimate the importance of the internal work of list building, of active recruitment, of infrastructure building, not just nationally or statewide, but locally. Many chapters don't have membership committees or ways to onboard new members to the local work or to what DSA is. And that is so crucial to establishing a shared understanding of DSA, but also affirming that socialism requires organization. We saw with last summer's recommitment drive that even low levels of engagement in this type of work have the ability to strengthen our work. And the work of that drive reversed the downward membership trend for the first time in over a year. And we're not alone on the left, right? It just means we have a responsibility to lead. So not just seizing opportunities to empower the class when conditions are in our favor, but also identifying those through constant assessment. We can hype ourselves up while also being real about the challenges that we face so we can talk about solutions rather than falling to despair. Internally, it means our low barrier for membership. We need a security culture. And finally, we have to recognize DSA can't be everything. We need to focus our organizational resources and recognize this moment as a time of possibility and political questions.
Thanks, Christian. Next, it's Comrade Jenbo. Please introduce yourself.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Jenbo in San Francisco. I didn't mean to rhyme that. She, her pronouns, and I am a free agent. So if you're a caucus looking for me, I'm right here. So to answer your question on sort of how do we orient ourselves for like the long haul and what we need to do for intentional growth is I'm always going to go say that we need to organize collectively in shared terrains of struggle, like in the workplace, campuses, our communities, through things like tenant organizing and serve the people campaigns. Our organization now is like really campaign focused, and two of our priority campaigns or priorities, the National Electoral Committee and the Green New Deal, focused for the last year on electoral campaigns. And I think what got lost in that is the one-on-one relationship building work of organizing. As much as I see the value in like door knocking and phone banking, like I think everyone should door knock so they get used to people telling them no, but also so you get used to talking to strangers. I think that we've really lost like what makes organizing, and that is like having these like one-on-one or like conversations. And so I think just moving to that. For intentional growth, I think about this a lot, especially as a member of MROC, our multiracial organizing committee. I think in order to do intentional growth, especially around like BIPOC socialists, it's again, organizing at sites of struggle, campaigns around like where capitalism has disproportionately targeted people of color, like racist housing policies, environmental justice, domestic labor, anything that materially improves the lives of people while pointing out the failures of capitalism and how it intersects with race and radicalizing people through political action and then having them join DSA. I wasn't even looking at the chat, so I think that might be my time. If not, I'm just gonna cede my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Comrade. Comrade Ashik, please introduce yourself.
Hey, comrades. My name is Ashik Sadiq. I'm on the NPC. I've been a longtime member of the Metro DC DSA chapter, and I've been living in Wilmington, North Carolina for the past year. So I think important context for all of this is that we've been through a really hard time the past couple of years. 23 million people in the US have had COVID. The same forces that have created a tight labor market means many people are too sick to work. And that's impacting civil society, including DSA. Like, we live in a society, and we're not going to solve all the problems of our society together in just one organization. I think it's really important to give ourselves and each other some grace and commit to keep building on our many strengths. I came up in organizing in one of our largest chapters, and in the past year, I've been living in a smaller, newer chapter, which has been really grounding in national leadership and helped understand what kind of support most of our chapters need. Many of which we already have at the national level. We have really excellent organizer training. We have org tools, guidance on best practices for member recruitment and engagement. But with current capacity, we're really limited in our ability to transmit this information and really share this qualitative ongoing guidance for members who need it. And we're doing hard work together. We can't just count on the good intentions and volunteer labor of our members to do it. And our most active members, as well as our paid staff, are really overworked. We only have 5 field organizers on staff for over 200 chapters. That's about 40 each. If you cut that by members, it's 1 organizer for every 12,000 members, and it's impossible for each full-time organizer to have meaningful contact with their whole turf. Many unions have ratios of 1 staffer per 1,000 members. So for an org the size of DSA, that would be anywhere from 60 to 90 full-time workers. We currently have on the order of 30. So this is a situation that our membership currently has the resources and I think interest to improve, but we need to really collectively commit to, the strategies that will help us best level up. Like, to paraphrase Marx, from each according to their ability, to each according to their needs. We can do a lot more with our member resources, not just our labor, but also fundraising. Many members can afford to pay more. We've done membership surveys. I know a lot of you can afford it. We had a recommitment drive that lasted for just a few months last year and exceeded goals with over 5,000 members recommitted. If we committed to an annual dues drive and at least that many shifted to income-based dues, we could raise potentially millions of dollars over the next year and be able to fund a much larger range of the work our members want to do collectively. And I think that's really critical to everything we want to do beyond convention this year.
Thanks, Comrade. Next is Sophia. Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'll introduce myself again. Sophia, she, her, Jersey City. I'm on the NPC and on the Bread and Roses caucus. So yeah, for this question, I really agree with a lot of what's been said. Many of us came into DSA through the Bernie moment at what felt like, to me anyway, like this pre-revolutionary moment. And now that that time is kind of behind us, I think we've struggled to maintain momentum. Our membership numbers have been declining. But I think the reality is that when you look at history and the socialist movement, it always goes through these ebbs and flows. And we are in an ebb period, but it's not going to last forever. There's going to be a crisis or an opportunity coming soon, and we really need to start preparing for it. And we should see this period as, in some ways, a gift, right? To really take the time and assess our long-term strategy, especially in the months ahead of convention. Right now, I think that we really need more clarity on what our long-term vision is. For example, I don't really think we have a clearly agreed upon electoral strategy right now. It's still an open question, like why we do elections. Is it to pass legislation primarily? Is it to organize the working class primarily? What is our relationship to the Democratic Party? Are we a loyal opposition? Are we intent on building independent organization? What's the relationship of our electeds once they're in office? Are they expected to adhere to what they ran on? And I think the fact that we still have to really address these questions, and some of these questions we haven't really addressed yet, I think that's at the root of a lot of conflict that I've seen on this term. I'm thinking about Jamal Bowman's vote on the Iron Dome, most recently the Squad's vote on the railway tentative agreement. So I think we really need to address these questions, and not doing so is going to make it a lot harder for us to maintain DSA as a socialist organization. Everything is going
Sophia, unmute yourself.
Oh, just for the record, y'all, Griffin is graciously taking time and will be hard muting us when we get the end of our time.
Okay, so this is a good segue to our next question. And how does DSA build independent organization and identity while participating and taking stands in electoral campaigns? And Christian, you go first.
Great. I mean, to me, the answer is pretty simple: by running explicitly DSA campaigns. I think there's a lot of tension when it comes to electoral campaigns, although I don't think that these tensions are unique to electoral work, but would apply to any campaign that aims to change the status quo, because those require partners, compromises, and inevitably include the possibility of co-optation. One, because this work tends to require collaboration outside of just DSA, and two, the forces that play can vary so widely depending on what the demand is. So I think it's important to be clear on what exactly we're wanting to achieve with the word independent. We need to be clear about what independence means. Is it independent of the Democratic Party, since our candidates run on the Dems ballot line? And if so, what would it take to do that? Does that mean it's something we do now, no exceptions, or is it something we plan for? I don't think there's disagreement about the need for a working class party, but wanting one and building one are two different things. And there's little talk of what that concretely looks like. NYC is cited for the powerhouse that it's grown to be. It's our largest chapter, but has more favorable conditions since it's not entrenched with the Republicans, but Democrats present their whole challenges. So it took a lot to get to the point where we have a People's Republic of Astoria and a legislative caucus that is working with members, but also backed by organizations to do the work we want them to do. So I think the question we should be focusing on is more how we get chapters from other parts of the country to be a formidable force of contention to business as usual, recognizing that the path may be different than in New York City. And also using power builds power. And until we have the power at all levels to achieve what we want, and this fight will not get easier as more power also means more opposition, we are going to have to contend with contradictions and navigate those together. And one-on-one conversations matter, but we need to do this work at the scale of the urgency of the moment. We must avoid relegating ourselves to irrelevance or settling for a rigid radicalism that sounds good in practice, but means very little for the world that we're trying to build. So we all have different pitches for what DSA is, and a starting point here is also coming to better understanding of what we are, what that means for the type of work we do, and how we do that work.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christian. Comrade Jembo, you're next.
Thanks, Jose. So yeah, I mean, you've probably heard me say this before, but as socialists, every decision we make in this sphere has to be toward class independence from capitalist parties. I'm not advocating for a Green Party, I promise. And I understand that it's not always possible to run an independent campaign. We'll use Democratic Party line, but it's always possible to have clear, unapologetically socialist messaging. Our candidates in our election should always be educating the working class to a better world and socialist independent party, and not twisting ourselves to make progressive Democrat messaging sound socialist. And this goes for candidates and also goes for any ballot measures or reforms that improve the lives of the working class, even if they don't destroy capital. So that means national and chapters should be working together on clear socialist messaging that speaks to local conditions and ties it to our political platform and probably our national work. We also need to put out critical messaging when our federal electeds or other people who have large platforms do something that betray basic socialist values of anti-capitalism, anti-imperialism, or anti-worker, and to not let their big platforms create the narrative of what DSA is. We can do this critically and not like, you know, in a way that like totally destroys a relationship. I just think that we need to have our own messaging around this and not just tail other parties. And lastly, I have a little bit of time left. It also really, really sucks that chapters and the NEC and we work so hard to get these wins in the electoral sphere. And we don't promote them anywhere other than like the day of like our like Twitter campaigns. Like I want people to know that what DSA is winning them. I want like a regular person to say like, oh my God, DSA got rent control in 10 cities. Oh my God, DSA got a civil right to counsel across the country. And we just don't promote that work. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Comrade Ashik. You're next.
Yeah, so I think we shouldn't think of these two goals, independent organization and strong electoral organizing, as being primarily in opposition to each other. And as others have said, the chapters that have the strongest ties to their electeds, who have actually begun proto-party work in earnest, like chapters like New York State chapters, Metro DC, DSA, Milwaukee, Denver. We have a bunch of them that are able to accomplish what they have because DSA has built independent campaigns and strong, electoral infrastructure that does not rely on the Democratic Party consultant or machine infrastructure or capitalist funding, which is what keeps other politicians in tow. So I think that the ballot line question is kind of premature for us to spend too much time on right now. It's important, but whether our electoral project ends in a break or a takeover is something that I think we're years from seriously discussing. And our priority right now should be building that proto-party and independent program and network of activity. We need to build that up first so we can demonstrate a positive vision to really credibly win working class people, toward our common project. It's really important to propagandize against, what's wrong and bad. That comes naturally to leftists, but it doesn't reach everyone in the working class who, already know it, but don't believe that it's possible to change. So it's really important that we have to run to win and to build lasting organization within DSA with really solid lessons learned that build our institutional knowledge, even when we don't win. And against all the external conditions we're up against, DSA is actually doing really well on this front. Our win rate from the past year has us, building up the socialist bench with 14 state caucuses. We have hundreds of elected officials, at least a 60% win rate for national campaigns. So we have a lot of really exciting experiments across chapters like door-to-ballot campaigning, lessons learned from union organizing that can apply to electoral work, that we need to keep building up the national resources to share best practices and the experiments that are working or lead toward potential wins. And that can really guide the ways that our chapters keep innovating together. And all across the South, especially where I live now, chapters are increasingly dealing with similar conditions and demographic shifts that have a lot of common potential strategies that we can use together. Largely, I think a lot of chapter leaders in these regions don't feel like we have to reinvent the wheel or throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's a lot we can learn and apply and keep innovating around together.
Thanks, Comrade Sophia. You're next.
Okay, I'm timing myself. So socialist electoral campaigns and officials have to see their primary goal as building independent organization and identity among the working class. And this means we're going to be approaching elections differently from liberals and even our favorite progressives who often see their role not primarily as organizing the working class, but passing legislation on behalf of the working class. So we really need to steer a different course and use our campaigns and our bully pulpits as politicians to clearly agitate people around the conflict between capitalists and workers, and to point out when politicians in the Republican and Democratic parties are screwing workers over and siding with capital. I think a real missed opportunity for this was several months ago when rail workers rejected the terrible contract that their union, the bosses, Biden, were pushing down their throats. And at this moment, our DSA members in Congress, they could have stood by the workers' decision to reject this contract and strike, and they could have voted against the tentative agreement and held town halls, organized rallies in support of workers. They could have fundraised for strike support. But instead, they focused on legislative maneuvering for sick days, which everyone knew wasn't going to pass. And as a result, they saved face for Democrats and presented Democrats as people pushing for sick leave rather than what they were actually doing, which was breaking a strike. So we have to remember that anytime we present ourselves as allies of corporate Democrats for the sake of a small chance of passing legislation, which we usually can't win anyway, at least right now when we haven't built enough of a base, it's going to undermine our ability to agitate and organize people around class lines and confuse and demoralize them as well.
Thanks, Comrade. Justin, you are next.
I think one of the things that's frustrating to me when we talk about either independent political organization or engaging in electoral politics, and that being kind of lumped together as the party question, we don't talk about the other things that a party is supposed to do, at least historically as socialist and communist political parties. And like running candidates for election, being in legislative bodies, that is a big part of it. It's important. I don't want to, deny that, but there's a whole life of things that happen outside of an election cycle. I think what's really important for us to think about is like, if we claim to want to be a proto-party, what does it look like? What does it look like to be present in all of the other areas in which class struggle happens in working class people's lives? And that way, like, we're not, because I think, this is anecdotal, but sometimes we can look a little bit like the Democrats in that we show up when there's a cycle and we're going harder in that cycle. And where are we outside the cycle? We need to be present in the lives of working class people round the clock, 24/7, 365. What does it look like for us to do that? That means analysis of where the class is active, where the class is moving in motion. And that's not just in elections, lots of different ways. We need to find those ways. We need to embed ourselves in all of those different struggles. And I think that is how we build the independent political organization that can then contribute in an even bigger way. When we get into a ballot, we get to a ballot, we get to an election, we get to the election cycles.
Thanks, Comrade. Let's talk about the organizational reforms, if any, that should be adopted to reflect our commitment to a membership-led democratic organization like ours in DSA. And Comrade Jembo, you're first.
Great, thank you. Okay, so there are 3 ways that changes are made in the way DSA is run. Member-produced bylaw amendments, member-produced resolutions, and resolutions passed by the NPC in between convention. That just means there needs to be some sunshine in how things function at national level, so members know how to change it. On Monday, I met with the NEC, the interim NEC co-chairs, and they were surprised to learn that the NPC doesn't discuss endorsement candidates. We get their recommendations, which is a really robust process. Like the NEC does a great 2-step process on this, not including the chapter endorsement process, but we just get their recommendations, throw it up on Illumio, and then up, down, vote it. And that means there's no cohesion between our vote and the NEC's vote, especially if the national body votes no. And it's been like this for the 3 years I've been on the NPC, and I'm surprised nobody knows that's how it happened. The same thing with our grievance process. It's pretty shrouded in secrecy. And if people don't know about this, like, well, what else don't they know? And can they make any changes? So I think there's need to be more sunshine on how things function. And we also need to open up work more to the membership. We have 25 national bodies, give or take. There are about 130 leadership positions, and 26 of them are made up by the same 12 people. A person who ran for the NPC and didn't get elected sits on more national bodies than I do, and that doesn't feel like respecting a democratic election. It's just distrust of members, the idea that whole groups of members or wreckers and unmoving ultras has caused a layer of leadership to disappear. So there's more work, which is cool, on fewer people. And so then this lack of capacity has led members of the NPC to push to outsource this work to consultants or contractors or other staff, which is like the opposite of a member-led organization. I got my 10-second mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Ashik. You're next.
Yeah, so I agree. It's really important to close the gap between the national organization and chapter members and at-large members. There's a really big problem across the org that we're spread way too thin, and we need to find better ways to prioritize work collectively at the chapter or national level. And it's hard for a lot of members, including newer ones who came in just through the past 2 years, which is a lot of our membership, to know how to work through conflict constructively. And in the past year or two, we've seen a lot of conflicts across chapters that seem to come down to questions about how to allocate resources. There are a lot of conflicts that seem to come down to small groups of members who, decide how to use resources and sometimes even allocate them to functionally separate organizations without meaningful deliberation from the rest of membership about how those resources are allocated and how to, make sure there's mutual accountability. And I think sometimes there can be a sort of, just because of the background that a lot of our newer members have, there might be a sort of, liberal sort of nonprofit type mindset of people seeing DSA as like another big pot of money that they can, get grants from or something, but without much accountability. And we do have national grant programs that we've talked about that are really successful, but built through that collective decision-making. So the lack of mutual accountability is where pretty bad conflicts can arise. So I think it's really important to standardize more practices across the organization about how we allocate resources and set clear collective expectations around how democracy works with, really robust and open structures for debate about strategy, which anyone should feel free to dissent or criticize. But then when decisions are collectively made, it should be possible to follow through that with the expectation that a minority doesn't actively organize against how that's implemented. And in DSA, we're an ideological big tent and mass organization. We should also learn from the history of the left in the US and elsewhere and recognize that there are other organizations on the left who are not committed to mass organizing. And it's fair to call, sectarian. So, we should be, as we're strategizing together, we need to assess where sometimes small groups of people push strategies that have failed or not been successful anywhere. And, be able to figure out together what we decide is working and what to keep committing to, and really, figure out how to take on our real enemies more forcefully than we struggle against each other.
Thanks, Comrade Sophia. You're next.
Timer. Yeah, so DSA is uniquely democratic in our society, where unions are declining, where NGOs have assumed an outsized role in what we think of as the left. But that said, there is still a lot we can do to strengthen the democracy of this organization. I think right now at the national level, DSA operates a lot like the staff-led NGOs that we critique. And those elected to politically lead the organization, like myself, like others on this call, we're doing so as volunteers with full-time jobs and hopefully social lives and all that. And too often, key decisions end up being made by senior staff who are in charge of managing lower level staff, our multi-million-dollar budget and other resources. And as full-timers and political people are going to play a political role as they should. So going forward, I would really recommend that we consider electing some of the director positions. In particular, I think the national director position, who's responsible for the functioning of day-to-day operations in DSA and plays a very large role in the political direction. I think we should also look at structures of other parties where elected political leaders are expected to work full-time and are paid to do so. So I would really suggest that we look into making some NPC members, especially the chair, full-time positions, not just so we can have more democratic oversight over, our resources, over our staff, et cetera, but also so we can have the time to be more political and be in the public sphere. So we can be traveling the country, visiting chapters, standing on picket lines, writing op-eds, being on the news. And you just can't do that when you're volunteering and working a full-time job.
Thank you, Comrade. Justin, you're next.
Thanks. So I think a big problem that we have is kind of like a lack of meaningful connection between chapters and the national organization. Others have touched on this problem. I think part of that is building a formal layer of leadership between beyond just the NPC. So some kind of layer of leadership that falls beneath the NPC, I suppose, if you want to put it that way, but is a little bit closer to membership. What that looks like in structure and how that's composed, there's lots of ways we can figure out how to do that, but I think that's important to kind of more tangibly tie chapters to the national organization. I agree that we need to really, really think through how are we going to make a truly member-led organization. So I agree with Sophia on that count. I think, and this is part of what we're doing with these reforms for convention, is we need actual holistic strategy. I don't know that we have one. I think at convention, what we usually do is we get our factions, our teams together, and we all do what we can to pass the thing that we really, really care about. And then we kind of just go off in our corners. I don't think that's what convention should be for. I think convention should be for us to come together to assess our political terrain, to come to agreements about what is the most important work, what are the most important places for us to be engaged, and make decisions about how we actually take that back to our chapters and implement that strategy. Not just pass a thing and then what has tended to happen is like we have a very uneven level of participation in the things that we decide to do at convention. I want convention and the outcomes of convention to be meaningful. We need to pass far less stuff. We need to have a lot more buy-in on the things that we do pass.
Thank you, Comrade. Christian, you're next.
Okay, sorry, thank you. Yeah, I mean, so structurally, I think expanding the NPC is one way. There's way too much work for 16 people, but I also think this requires a collective view on our labor and also more clarity on how decisions are made. I think suspicion of decisions is high when decision-making isn't clear or familiar. So being strategic about our transparency is how we build trust and deepen the understanding across membership about what it actually takes to make things happen. Establishing the NOC, a resolution that was brought up at a previous convention. There's a huge gap between national and locals. It's definitely felt by everyone on the NPC. And I do think some of that is being remedied through statewide organizations, but I don't actually think every state is ready for these formations. We need to bring more leaders into the challenges facing DSA and share the burden while also not pulling people into roles for the sake of roles, since we don't have unlimited capacity. Ideologically, I think, what does democracy look like in practice? Does it mean democratically elected leaders are empowered to advance collective decision-making? Does it mean non-elected bodies making decisions about the organization? What does democracy look like at all levels of the organization? We need shared principles on discipline and accountability. These vary and are not universally applied in the organization. Democratic decision-making often can be undermined through Twitter discourse, through the manufacturing of crisis, through organizing for minority positions that are framed as indicators of people's morals or commitments to liberation, or rooted in neoliberal identity politics. Conflict is necessary, absolutely, but it should be engaged in and not wielded. We need to make sure our conventions are not just isolated events, as Justin mentioned, that our stakes are unclear after we adjourn, but whose decisions are understood by all members, that there's a commitment by everyone, not just the NPC, but everyone to carry out the work, and a clarity on what that work means for the chapter. We also can't dismiss what needs to be changed to make DSA feel how we want it to feel: more compassionate, joyful, stronger. The traditions and shoulders that we stand on are often dismissed, especially our DSA elders, and there's not really a culture of people being able to share their opinions without fears or attacks or harassment. And yes, I'm looking at the reactions right now because it's not how y'all would be acting in person. I don't think that makes us more democratic. Our experiences matter, but they are not universal. So we need to be realistic about what DSA can be for people. A political organization where we fight for more, yes, but DSA is not our therapist. So how do we make our org transformational with a constant belief that our comrades are not the enemy?
Thanks, Comrade. Let's go to the next question. What is the best strategy for fighting the far right? And Ashik, you're first.
Yeah, so my thoughts on this are really grounded by living in a city in North Carolina that was the site of a successful white supremacist fascist coup over a century ago, which violently ended Reconstruction, and it's never really recovered from that. And there's a direct through line here from the forces behind that coup on the far right today, and like there's a very direct, like not just parallels, but there's an ongoing continuity of, you know, like from like family descendants who are still in power, like of local, you know, politics and infrastructure. And, you know, there's a long history of the far right intertwined with power structures. And in North Carolina, in the past few months, there's been some really scary escalations, like organized attacks on energy infrastructure, armed intimidation of like drag queen story hours at public libraries, like physically threatening queer, trans, marginalized people, and, you know, really demonstrating, I think, how the attacks of the right are all interconnected. But there's also a lot of reasons to believe, like from talking to comrades doing the work, like in chapters all over the country, that the potential for multiracial working class formation is also different and in some ways very promising today, and our strategies have to be interconnected too. And I think that especially in parts of the country that are currently under-resourced in organizing, we can't retreat from mass campaigns. Like we have to organize in ways that demonstrate a real alternative is possible to neoliberal austerity, and that really forcefully counters the way that the far right is taking advantage of the failures of neoliberalism. And that means integrating our strategies, like base building strategies like labor and tenant organizing that build working class institutions. That has to be integrated with mass organizing that activates more and more working people to contest capitalist and state power. So we're doing a lot in DSA, like resource organizing in red states and swing states, like the successful abortion ballot measures in the past year that we funded with national grants. There's electoral work that DSA members have backed in like states like Michigan, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and we need to scale up our resources to support this, like building out an electoral program with staff like an electoral director and staff organizers to really support the work that our volunteers alone can't do. And this can all really help us in times of major societal crises. Capitalists are always ready to swoop in with shock doctrine policies that grab resources and repress a disorganized population. We need to be able to build the people shock from the bottom, and DSA is building that structure. We need to keep scaling it up.
Thanks, Comrade. You're up, Sophia.
Hi. So in terms of fighting the right, socialists have to lead that fight, right? We can't delegate that fight to centrist Democrats. We really need to be leading it. And I felt a really great example of this was in New York City DSA, where our socialists in office, they led the way as a unified bloc, and were the first to oppose a really conservative judge, LaSalle, who the Governor Hochul was putting forward. And as a result, they made themselves really clearly legible in the media, which was reporting on them as these socialists, standing up against this appointment, and they managed to stop it. Another great example, I think, of fighting the right is in Brazil right now. Early this January, the far right stormed the Capitol in Brasilia in a demonstration against Lula. Eerily very similar to what happened here on January 6th. But there, Brazilians responded with these massive popular protests led by left parties and social movements. Whereas here, we had these January 6th hearings, which, while they were good in the sense that they dismantled, right-wing networks and so forth, they still were this very kind of elite-driven, like anti-right effort, and propped up a lot of institutions that themselves are responsible for the right, like the FBI. So I really think we need to have a popular bottom-up, like left-led movement against the right.
Thank you, Comrade. Justin, you are next.
Okay, so I think part of this is, I'm kind of answering every question with the same answer, which is like, we need to be present where the class is struggling. I think an example of this, I agree with what Sophia was just saying, but I also think, a great example that also happened in New York was when, after the Dobbs decision came down, a group of people in our chapter, in collaboration with other left organizations, found out about an event happening at the a Federalist Society event happening, had a demo happen in the park or whatever, but actually like ran up on this meeting happening at this place with a bunch of Federalist Society people. And like that presence in a struggle that's happening, that flexibility to respond on it at a dime on what's happening in the world, I think is really key. But again, going back to like my kind of answer for every question, like the right has built institutions within civil society and maintained them. I would not say the same for progressives/liberals, and I would definitely not say the same for the left. I think our task is to develop those civil institutions, to develop, the kind of associational gel that we just don't have in America. And that happens in a lot of different ways. And some of that has to do with what happens in elections at the ballot box, but a lot of it doesn't. It happens where you live, it happens where you work, it happens in your community, your neighborhood, the place where your kids go to school, your church, your whatever religious community you might be a part of. It happens in a lot of different places. I think part of what we need to do is take our organizing mindset that we have from DSA and apply it to the rest of our lives.
Thanks, Comrade Christian. You're next.
Thanks, Jose. Love this question. Love punching Nazis. I think building a strong left is the best way to fight the far right, as well as working to push the center into taking this threat seriously, and being discerning about where there are opportunities to work together on a specific project with the center, I should mean. I think voting rights is one example of where this is possible. Defending democracy is absolutely vital. While the red wave of the midterms, for example, was curbed, and thus a lot of anti-democratic efforts failed, DSA was largely absent from those specific efforts, which is unfortunate because I do think that there's a lot DSA can do to expand the horizon when it comes to defining democracy and addressing disenfranchisement based on race, immigration status, disability, and class. I think committing ourselves to abortion ballot measures in red and purple states, building on the amazing work we already achieved in places like Kansas, Kentucky, and Montana, particularly when it comes to talking to rural voters who've largely been dismissed by the Dems, but are also being targeted for recruitment by the far right. Fighting the carceral state and continuing defund efforts. So much of our work is tied into the strength of the police state, and we need to be able to articulate an abolitionist vision in all of the work that we're doing. And finally, fighting anti-trans and LGBTQ legislation and attacks. There's a twisted culture war being fought, and the espoused narratives are so fucking harmful to this community, a demographic heavily represented in DSA. DSA is very gay, and the right is not shy about what they want to do with our comrades. I think that means showing up to local events, drag reading hours, but it also means contending for local positions on school boards, sharing a positive narrative to counter all of these attacks and legislations, while also taking the time to educate and inform people about how these attacks are harmful and that they're just the start of a bigger and more expansive agenda to eradicate anyone who does not benefit from white nationalism.
Thanks, Comrade. And Jembo, you are up now.
Great. Great speeches, everyone. To quote Murray Weiss, our conception of fighting the fascists is to crush them in the egg, never give them a chance to become powerful antagonists. For every blow the fascists deliver against any section of the working class or minorities, we propose that labor strike back with 10 blows. I think about this all the time. I even had some, I know this is a bad story. I'll tell a story over a bar sometime. But what does that mean for us? It means that when Nazis come to town, we need to drive them out by showing up at the same time, at the same location with more people. And to build off how Justin ended his comment, we build that by forming relationships with our neighbors and coworkers through workplace and tenant organizing in our own buildings and in our own jobs. We build actual camaraderie with people volunteering their time in local campaigns. We do this by forming united fronts with community-based organizations. We do this through education on how to spot fascism, the histories, and how to identify right-wing dog whistles. And so we do this through organizing people. It's not so much just organizing people, we have to organize against complacency. One of my comrades, Darby, said, like our enemies aren't just the right, they're Netflix and they're the couch. And thinking about all the billion other things people want to do instead of politics or fighting fascism. But when we do this, it means when the fascists come to town or they come to your workplace to take away your coworker, ICE is there, you and your coworkers stand up and you have their back. Somebody's going to get an abortion and there's people in their face, and you and your community members, your neighbors, they're up there fighting back. And I think that's something that we've lost a lot of is building that actual sense of community through conversations with your actual neighbor, like the person who lives next door to you, to your coworker. Like we're always, let's organize a shop outside of here, but you want to talk to your doofus coworker and let them know you have their back and they have yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Comrade. Our last question for the debate this evening is, given our current political economic conditions, what should be our strategy for building power for workers in the workplace? And Sophia, you are first.
Okay, so we've had an uptick in labor activity lately with new organizing that's happening in Starbucks, Amazon. There's lots of activity in academia, including my own university, which I now got recognized, its union. But this is still not an upsurge, at least of the size that we need to change the balance of power, and union rates, they're still declining. So we definitely need to continue and scale up our labor work. I think strike solidarity is something DSA is very good at. There's lots of examples to look at. There's East Bay DSA's Bread for Ed campaign, which I think raised $172,000 from donors across the country for the Oakland Education Association's strike. Or more recently, to shout out Portland DSA, the Nabisco strike, where DSA chapters started a GoFundMe and got like almost $100,000. So that's all important, but we can't just support labor from the sidelines, even though strike solidarity is very important, but we also need to join the labor movement by organizing our current workplaces, but also getting jobs in strategic industries right now, like nursing and teaching and logistics and more. And we really need to root ourselves in workplaces for the long, sometimes slow work of helping coworkers organize. Sometimes that work is slow, but not always. The Chicago Teachers Union, for example, only 2 years after they started organizing at the grassroots in their school, they took power. Right now at the UAW, members are taking advantage of an unprecedented opportunity to elect their top officers. So there are all kinds of opportunities, but we can't take advantage of them if we're not in the workplace. So socialists need to be in the workplace. It's very important.
Thank you, Comrade Justin. You're up.
Thanks. So, I think I agree with Sophia. I think, we have historically, since I've been in DSA, we've been really great at showing up on the picket line for other people's labor struggles. I think we've really, really fine-tuned that. What we did in New York with the Teamsters up in Hunts Point was really, really special. What I want to see more of is not just labor solidarity. I want DSA members in labor fights. I want them organizing their workplaces. I want them radicalizing the unions that already exist in their workplaces. I was fortunate enough to meet a bunch of people in New York City DSA who had a lot more labor experience than me. I learned a lot from them. I went and helped organize my workplace. I want to see more of that for our members. And I think it's beginning to happen. I think a lot of credit to the NLC. They've done good work. I was at the Labor Notes conference over the summer. We didn't have official DSA programming at Labor Notes conference, but DSA was there in numbers, and it was really impressive to see how many members are embedded in the labor movement doing the work. And I think that's, I want to see more of that. There's going to be big fights coming up. It's been impressive to see DSA people really engaged in UAWD, for example. And there's the runoff election happening now that I hope we can beat the admin caucus there. What's going to be happening with the Teamsters and with UPS coming up down the pipeline is really important for us to show up there, and all of our members who are in that union leading that fight, and we're going to help them, support them with giving whatever they need to win that fight. So I think more of us, and it's good that NLC also did that survey about our membership to find out where you work and what union you might be in, so we can actually start to build that connective tissue for a fighting DSA labor activist core.
Thanks, Comrade Christian.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of what we've done in the past has helped and continue to advance the narrative around all of this energy for labor. I think, funding the NLRB, our PROACT work, but we also need to be identifying what sectors we want to take jobs in. For example, I think schools are a very important site of struggle with a mostly non-male workforce. The NEA is the largest union in the country. It's also a crucial site of struggle around racial justice, the right-wing attacks on CRT, immigrants, trans students, and the public good of public education. We have a lot of teachers and parents in DSA, and that also brings in that demographic more to DSA. So, need more parents and children in DSA for sure. But it also means making sure our labor work advances the multiracial nature of the class. I was at Labor Notes, and while it was wonderful and empowering, I did notice our DSA spaces were pretty white compared to the rest of the gathering. So I think also making sure we're identifying the barriers to people joining and looking at what sectors are representative of that, supporting the work of EWOC, embracing the worker first model that empowers millions of workers who do not feel power in the workplace. EWOC has been able to train nearly 600 people in workplace organizing skills, collaborate with nearly, 300 workplaces. And so I do believe EWOC is filling a role that many national unions are not, in terms of new organizing and connecting with unorganized workers who have issues in their workplaces. And while this is an incredibly beautiful and hopeful moment for labor organizing, whether Starbucks, Amazon, TDU, UAW, unionization is also at such a low ebb. We should be open to all forms of engagement with the labor movement, organizing agricultural and domestic workers who have been historically left out of federal labor laws, but are also disproportionately immigrant and Black and Latino workers, and also looking at where labor work intersects with our other efforts. For example, doing something like fixing public sector labor law and repealing right to work will require changing the balance of power in state legislatures and unseating Republicans. So looking at how that advances with our electoral strategy is super important.
Thank you so much, Comrade Jembo. You're next.
Great. So what should our strategy for building power for workers in the workplace be? In 2019, we passed two resolutions, one to do new organizing, organize the unorganized, and then also to adopt the rank and file strategy. And then in 2021, we had this like unity labor resolution that said like, hey, these are both still really good ideas. I don't know what other strategies there are that we should be undertaking, but I do think it's weird that as a socialist organization, we vote every 2 years to make labor a priority, and we should just stop doing that. That's our priority. And we need to actually, put our money where our mouth is and give the National Labor Committee or the NLC a budget to expand. There's going to be the UPS contract fight coming up soon. They also have their eye on the big 3 auto contracts expiring in September. We need to support them financially and organizationally. And I just don't understand why, as a socialist organization, we're not all in for labor. I don't know why they're not getting the lion's share of our organizational support and our financial support. As for strategy, I think the things that we've passed at convention have been great, and and the NLC is well thought out on this, and they're the best people to answer this. And so I feel a little uncomfortable speaking for like, what should the NLC be doing when like they've been doing it? And they should be getting more and more support from us, like I said, financially and organizationally, and we should stop saying they may at some point not be a priority, because they are our priority. Thanks.
Thanks, Comrade Ashik. You will close this section.
Yeah, I agree with what a lot of other folks are saying. To win the world we want, there are like absolutely no shortcuts to rebuilding and strengthening labor militancy, to grow workers' power, not just to, organize for their own self-interest. Like, we have to help workers in all sectors challenge capitalist power and intervene at sites of economic production. And the concept of bargaining for the common good is something that we have to have at the center of how we think about labor organizing and to socialist strategy. It's not just about workers' own self-interest, although that's critical, but also growing the circles of solidarity across different kinds of organizing. So everything our NLC is doing is really important to keep resourcing and building up. EWOC is really important. And DSA has to keep being in labor fights that inspire more workers to take on more, ambitious goals. We can help in DSA with media coverage of organizing and strike support, and just build class consciousness in every way we can. Like, I don't want to just speak in platitudes, but I think the Starbucks organizing has been really important for DSA to participate in. The historic UC strike in the past few months, led by many DSA members. And yeah, with new leadership taking over the Teamsters and UAW, we can work more as DSA to organize together at the institutional level. And that's an important part of, becoming a proto-party organization with a common political program between DSA and top left-leaning unions. So the UPS strike is a really important opportunity to keep building that over this year. I think in the past 2 years, DSA started to do this in a serious way through the ProAct campaign, building relationships with CWA and IUPAT, the painters union. And we can revisit this idea, just, how DSA at the top level and in chapters is building relationships with internationals and locals. So yeah, aligning to support a national contract campaign like the UPS contract expiring this summer. That's a really big opportunity to prepare every chapter to go out and support. Like, every DSA member should be equipped to talk to a worker on the picket line, develop that relationship past the strike. And there are many opportunities to keep building that, like through UAW. And like Justin said, like my own experience, unionizing my workplace happened because of DSA, because our chapter had solid relationships with unions that were at capacity, but sort of were able to informally share resources and help us get voluntary recognition. Like, those are the kinds of relationships we can better formalize and build out to help like members in any sector organize their workplace. So we have to organize everywhere.
Thanks, Ashik. This concludes our debate section tonight. I'd like to thank all the panelists for a great model of respectful, comradely debate and exchange. And now we're going to proceed to the question and answers section of our program tonight. Take it away, Ali.
Oh, actually, Jose, so we're going into the second part of our convention orientation. I believe Sophia is taking that part.
Yes, Michael, would you be able to get the slides up, please? I think we're at timeline and yes. Okay, so thank you all for sticking around for this discussion. I hope we have more, and I hope you all host some in your own chapters. But now to get back to some of the key details ahead of convention, I want to talk about timeline, especially when it comes to delegates to getting to convention. The first deadline to come up is March 17th. So that's when delegate apportionment is sent to chapters. Then a few weeks later in April, delegate nominations open and registration costs are announced then if you are interested in attending convention. In June 6th, delegate election results will be submitted, no later than then. And then July 24th, the temporary delegate roster is released. And then July 26th, you have credentials challenge deadline. And then registration is going to open May 13th, and it's going to close on July 13th. And then we're going to have convention in early August, 4th to 6th. Next slide. Okay, and the timeline for the resolutions. So constitutional and bylaws changes, they can be submitted starting February 20th. So that's less than a month away until April 14th. And remember that we're having higher thresholds this convention. So you're going to need 300 signatures from members in good standing, and amendments to things. That's going to close on June 14th, and that's also going to require 300 signatures from members in good standing. And then resolutions and platform amendments will have the same deadlines and same signature thresholds as well as for amendments. Compendium of proposed resolutions and bylaws changes will be sent to all members no later than June 30th, and with a final compendium released June 24th. And then amendments to NPC recommendations are due July 28th. Next slide, please. Okay, timeline at large. So if you are at large, the request deadline, February 28th. At large delegate nominations, those open April 4th. At large delegate nominations close May 4th. At large elections open May 18th, and at-large election closes June 6th, if you are an at-large member. Michael, can you go to the next slide? Okay, and for the NPC elections, if you want to join the highest leadership body of DSA, the candidate questionnaire, it will open on April 4th and close June 14th. And then we're going to be releasing the NPC candidate compendium on June 30th, and then NPC candidate forum is going to be held on July 14th. More may be announced as needed. Slide, please. Apportionment. So we've established a goal of 1,361 delegates and alternates to the 2023 National Convention. So delegates are going to be distributed according to a 175 ratio. So that's one delegate per 75 members based on chapter membership numbers as of March 15th. And it is highly recommended that you complete your membership asks and renewals by March 1st to be counted. And each chapter will also receive one alternate for every 10 delegates. The national office will inform locals of their delegate counts no later than Friday, March 17th. Next slide. Okay, February membership drive. With the deadline to finalize membership totals in March, the Growth and Development Committee is running a membership drive during the month of February to help chapters bring in more dues-paying members and build their local capacity, but also have greater opportunities to send more delegates to convention. This one pager, which someone could link in the chat, as well as the more detailed guide. They have step-by-step instructions. So you should find someone from your chapter to register and attend the training session, which is happening on February 1st. And your staff organizer can also help you implement these best practices. Are there any more slides, Michael? Okay. And then please look out for an end of year report that should be coming out sometime in February. It's going to talk about what we've done this term and cover all these things from electoral to budget to training series, YDSA, et cetera. So that should be out anytime now. Next slide, please. Okay, and now we're going to open it up for Q&A. There should have been a question and answer sheet form that was sent out to you when you registered. I think it was shared in the chat as well. So Allie and Griffin are going to pick out some of the questions. And then for the remaining, we're going to send out an FAQ. I think, I forget, by email or forum. Either way, it'll go out to you.
It seems that we don't have any questions, Sophia.
Okay, it looks like we actually just had some problems with the back end of the Q&A form. Also because there are quite a few questions being asked in the Q&A box that were also not necessarily related to convention. And it got a little difficult for our comrades, valiant comrades, trying to get through those questions. So I think just for the sake of time, since we only have about 6 minutes, we are just going to go ahead and end early. But again, the Q&A will be sent out a lot, as well as the slides, and we will be posting a recording of this call if you feel like watching it again, or if you know somebody who missed out and wanted to check it out. And the FAQ we will be posting in the forums, as well as sending out an email with the Q&A, and that will be regularly updated. So please don't hesitate to use the link that is being dropped in the chat right now to submit any and all questions related to convention for the committee to, you know, go through and answer. But that is it for us. I want to thank all my fellow NPC members, as well as our convention steering committee members, Allie and Griffin, and our awesome staff member, Michael, for helping make this call happen. Again, we are hoping to have more calls like this, hopefully a little longer, that enables us to, you know, do a little bit more back and forth, definitely hearing what folks are reacting to. But we also want to make sure that more than anything, people have a sense of what convention is and isn't for, how we can improve convention, and most importantly, how we can improve DSA. So again, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. That is it. So solidarity, comrades, great to have y'all on tonight, and hope to see y'all on a call real soon. Take care, folks.